We are, of course, talking about the celebration of the Satyajit Ray centenary at the film festival IFFSA in Toronto. And, it's my pleasure, really, Q. It is my real pleasure to be able to speak with you. Whenever I meet you, it's a joy. Just looking at you, I feel, a great sense of well-being, actually. And um, so, talking about Ray, I thought, uh, legacy. Legacies are everywhere, in our world, and they can work as boons or they can be a poison, you know. And I was wondering, that supposing Mr. Ray had never made a film, what might have been the loss, do you think, for Indian cinema?
First of all, thank you for calling me. It's a great pleasure to converse with you, and it would have been great to visit Toronto, but all the best to the
Indeed.
festival. Um, yeah, the issue here is the word legacy and the enormous amount of pressure that Bengalis immediately thrust upon you when the word is mentioned. It is very much one of the foundation stones of traditionalism. And certainly that was not Mr. Ray's outlook. I'm sure the way we have read about him and whatever we know, he was very self-aware. He knew exactly what he was, very conscious. A designer, so he would always plan things, design things before doing anything, executing anything. So he could see his place quite clearly, I think, when he started. He was aware of what an Indian filmmaker of global consequence could mean. And there was nothing of that sort at that time, and he stepped into the gap. And he had the autonomy of craft. He had also a lot of presentation skills that surprisingly few filmmakers actually even now have. Filmmaking is not considered to be a performance art form, though it has in it, it constitutes mostly of performance, but the director or the filmmaker is not performing. They're supposed to be this sort of linear, one-dimensional author. So I think, challenged that to a great degree. He made it sure that he went and took his place in the firmament, went to the right spots. We all know how important those things are. How to market yourself, because those were the markets for artistic cinema. That's where the people who really wanted these kind of films could be found. So if he didn't make films, India would still be, we would be grasping at thin air, though we would have had possibly great filmmakers, but with the right mix of charisma and outwardness and conscious design, that very much lacks in this, even now, I feel strongly. So that would have been the biggest loss. As you are well aware, I'm not a biggest fan of Ray, especially of his cinema. In fact, I'm quite a fan of his writing, because we all grew up on Telugu and Chomku and his numerous short stories, which are amazing. And he was an excellent graphic designer. And since I'm deeply interested in graphic design, come from that background, I feel a lot of respect that he created fonts at that time. Who does that? His Bangla fonts, since he died, has there's nobody who does that, has been able to even come up to, because we have a great culture of street art, and lots of fonts coming from election campaign. But his style was extremely different, and he could he could load meaning into fonts, so to speak. So I really find that remarkable, sitting in Calcutta doing all these things. So yeah, I mean, this would be possibly my answer.
Right. Right. Is there any particular film of his that sort of accompanies you as you grow in the field?
I think overwhelmingly it'd be the Gupigain, uh, the two Gupigain films,
Right.
because there's where I feel that's my scene, fantasy and fairy tale and folk tale. And I'm not an admirer of his other sort of cinema, apart from Kapurush or Mahapurush, which is another film which I think was extremely relevant, and very powerful. Though it isn't actually accommodated in his pantheon as one of the bests. Hardly anyone talks about it.
Right. Hugh, I know that you are actually going to play Satyajit Ray in an upcoming film, and I was wondering, what kind of insights that preparation might have brought to you about Ray. What is it that most impresses you or disappoints you about Ray, his cinema, and about him as a human being?
That's a very tough question. I'd get into a lot of soup if I answer honestly. I'm not an actor, so first of all, let's begin there. Obhijan is the name of the film. It's a biopic on Soumitra Chatterjee, and I play Ray in it. And the film spans about, in Ray's character's case, about 20 years. So um, there was a fair amount of research which I had already put in because of another film, actually, not this one. There was another film where I was cast as Ray before this, a few years back. And that was more of a central character, and I had done a lot of research at that time, which sort of became the the platform on which this role could be executed. So, as a person, it's difficult to understand what to make of him, because he was the ideal Bhadralok. Even if there were like one and a half scandals that Calcutta would talk about, it was very carefully and consciously snuffed out, so that Rai Babu's name wasn't, or Rai family's name wasn't ever. So, I mean, I find it very difficult to relate to that kind of Brahminism, and uh, which became for me an interesting path, because I didn't believe in it. I could look at it very objectively. Um, I think the level of consciousness that he displayed, I think that obviously that time was, that era was about that. It was far more honest, but also very conscious. Like, people would think before they would do things, and that's something that comes out at every level of his life. Whatever he has done, you can see the amount of work that has gone behind it before he's doing or saying something. So uh, these were the couple more most relevant things that I could think of. Another very clear visual language that I felt was he looked at himself like a Hollywoodian figure. You know, even the choice of the pipe which he took up later in life, you know, and this classic sort of Hollywood guy, that's what he always wanted to be. So I think these are the three key points that I can clearly pinpoint.
We are celebrating the centenary. The other question that comes up for me really is that in another 100 years, when people look back at Ray's cinema, do you think there is any one or two or three films of his that will speak still to the coming generations?
My vote would be on on Gupi Bagha and Hero Prajatish. Because they are metaphorical, because they are analogous, they are very different from his other work, which were always very topical and dealt with a kind of time and space that he specialized in, which makes, as every art form, which dates the artwork. Whereas whenever there is fantasy involved, that has a certain amount of longevity. So my vote will go on the children's work, because I think as a children's artist, there was nobody as serious in Bengali like him. So that is something that I find very relevant, even in terms of what literature he's produced and the cinema that he's made.
Thank you very much, Q. When we talk about legacy, it's good that we end with talking about children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you indeed.